think keep the process the same once you found something that works. I think is probably really, really key. Is my process is probably the same every week because I found something that works well for us and works well for the team, and we don't really deviate off that. So it's very much a routine now instead of a process. This is how we manage match day, and once you found those bits that really, really work, keep them. And if it isn't working, reflect on it and then make some little tweaks and changes to try and make the process better.
Hello and welcome to Coaching Cards. My name is Lee. I'm joined by Amanda and I'm joined by Taff, and we are going to chat around how coaches plan for match day. How important is it to plan for match day?
I think it's a really important process to go through. I think the match day can be stressful if you haven't gone through that planning process. So anything that you can do to reduce that stress and have planned out prior, I think is really important. I think, in the grassroots space, making sure everybody gets to the games where they need to be at the right time, everyone understanding what the location is, what they need to bring, which kit they're wearing, which colour if you're lucky enough to have a home and away kit.
Yeah, I guess a general thing across the game, if you like, around players being there, coaches being there, whoever's involved in that coaching team and that match day, knowing what to do and where to be.
I think overall roles and responsibility of staff is critical. Timing and locations of meeting where things are happening. Importantly, getting all the safety briefings in terms of what physios are on what pitch.
So what should be in the match day plan?
So my first bit would be like the starting lineup. Like you need to know who's likely to be playing, but then also who the substitutions are and minutes they might play. I guess from a grassroots perspective, we look at equal kind of game, fair playing time. I guess if I looked at the non-league space, or if you consider like the 11v11 game, I might even plan out sort of substitutions that I might make based on scenarios that occur in the game. I think that's important to put in a match plan if you're in a performance environment, 11v11 right, and you're trying to win a game of football. So I think that would be something that I would encourage people to put in a plan if you're working in that environment.
In terms of looking more within the professional game with the academies, you might have that starting lineup and the substitutions and so forth, but also within that plan considering, okay, we might have to change formations. What does that look like? What's the impact on the group? What's the impact on co-coaching and so forth, and who's going to manage that? So within that, trying to go in a little bit more detail within the academy setup is really looking at a tactical perspective as well.
Yeah, and also in your plan, making sure if you've got players that are overachieving and those that might be struggling a little bit, making sure that you don't have 3 or 4 players in the same area of the pitch that might be really, really dominant, or on the reverse of that might be really, really struggling. So you don't have one side of the pitch that is slightly weaker than the opposite. And I think that planning of those players in those positions is really, really vital and key, so that we're not almost stitching people up, having areas of the pitch that we're not as comfortable with.
In that way, from a IDB perspective, knowing where players are in their development, or even those that are going through maturations or coming back from injury and so forth, trying to get that planned in within the game when it's going to be best for those players to actually partake or sit out. That needs to be considered hugely.
I think like in my head, like especially working with young players, like mini soccer in a grassroots space, like game time is always for me over a period of time, which could be like a half-term piece, like 6 weeks maybe, as opposed to going each game is the same, and that I think should go into that match plan.
I think during the week in training, tend to have conversations with players of saying, especially positions, to give them a bit of a head up of going, at the weekend I'm going to ask you to play in these 2 positions, and make sure you know your roles and responsibilities with what you're doing.
I think that kills players sometimes, like when they turn up and don't know what they're meant to be doing. You get those players that like, they just want to know what's happening and where they're playing, and if you are rotating positions, how do you let those players know? And you put it into your match day plan, and then communicating that with those individuals could be quite important, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think that links into the training plan leading into the match plan, so there's a seamless connection between the whole training week. And I think that we're just on that, just adding on in terms of through that planning process, you might be aware of a team that you're coming up against. Either they're stronger or similar toe-to-toe, or you'll over-dominate them. How do you actually cater for the needs of the players? So in that way, going into that space knowing, okay, that's going to be a tough game. We need to manage in terms of individuals that are coming back, or maybe some sort of 1v1 battle between or unit battle. So having awareness of who you're going to go and play in that next game. So yeah, not just looking at it from an individual perspective, but on a bigger scale as well.
Yeah. Would you have, like in my head, I'd have real clear roles and responsibilities for the coaching team. Personally, I would suggest it's quite important to to have real clear roles and responsibilities from a coaching team perspective in there?
No, I'd agree with that, and I think going one step further, like even roles and responsibility with some of the players. So they're observing, okay, you're going on the pitch in 10 minutes time. This is your role. This is what you're looking for. So they're going in there with a picture. In terms of co-coaching, definitely, or even like multiple coaching, because certain clubs within the academies have got deal with the back unit, midfield unit, front unit. So are we in sync? Are we communicating at the right times? Are we overloading the players? Or those kind of things need to be considered in order to actually, I suppose, succinctly land the message.
And I think it takes time to organise that co-coaching relationship with the people that you work with. That's not something that happens overnight. You know, when you're working with that team around you, finding out who has strengths and weaknesses in different areas and really using people for their strengths, of being able to say, you know, you might have one of the people that help you out might be really, really good at communicating messages, and they might lead the first part of the team talk while you're organising other bits. It could be that you've got other staff that you work with that are really good with working with certain individual players and allowing them to manage those individual players. So I think that's a relationship that builds up over time, and then that can really help your planning moving forward for the rest of the season. In
terms of being in a plan, in the bigger picture, it could be in like the non-league space, the grassroots space, the female game. It doesn't really matter what element of the game it is. I just think that continuity and also the clarity and transparency could be quite important.
I also think it's knowing your players, knowing that one player might need that additional information over others that might be a little bit more relaxed about the situation and are quite happy to make those changes. I've got some of the girls that we work with that really need to know the detail of what they're doing and what's expected of them, and they'll ask maybe more questions because that's the detail that they want to know about what the game's going to look like. So I think knowing your players is really, really important to know what they need in that match day plan, because some might need a little bit more detail than others.
What does match day planning process look like for you? For me, I like to start beginning of the week, so it's not just we'll start on Thursday and we're planning for Saturday or Sunday and so forth. So how does that look like right the way through the week? So what are we working on? How does it impact the players? What players are going to be playing? So for me, time is a big factor. So one of the big things for me is like starting the process quite relatively early and then following it through.
So yeah, added on to that, I guess my one would be starting with the end in mind. So what's the purpose of the game? Is it to win the game? Is it around developing players? Is it around individual learning plans? Is it around developing a unit of the players? Like what are we trying to get? What's going to be the purpose of that match day, and then working back from that? Like how many training sessions have I got? How long have I got my players? Like what's the most important thing I could then do in training to work backwards, and then going into that plan. The process is looking at what do my pre-match activities look like if it's working in grassroots football, and how can I replicate something in training to have that link from training into game day.
I think keep the process the same once you've found something that works. I think is probably really, really key. Is my process is probably the same every week because I found something that works well for us and works well for the team, and we don't really deviate off that. So it's very much a routine now instead of a process. This is how we manage match day, and once you've found those bits that really, really work, keep them, and if it isn't working, reflect on it and then make some little tweaks and changes to try and make the process better.
What's the most important thing for a coach to remember when they start planning for match day? I
wouldn't say there's one imperative important thing to go after. I think there's multiple things, but I think definitely from a multidisciplinary perspective within the academies is utilising the support staff and getting everyone's views on what that should look like, because there's things that you'll do and you'll see that might lead your bias to narrow down and look at, but just involving everyone in terms of co-coaching, physios, S&C coaches, with regards to that, really builds a bigger picture in terms of that plan.
I think what is your intended outcome? That's sort of almost working backwards. So what does success look like for that week? What are we going after? And then from there, that can then really set that plan up for what we're doing.
I'd agree. My head goes, what's the purpose? Am I a team that, as grassroots football, where it is turn up and play? Have we got something around developing players? Now the two might be coupled together, but have we got something around developing players? And then the flip side of that, is it about winning games of football? And you might have a mix of all of them in there, but to have a clear purpose of what that match day is, then should it start to influence your plan on what goes into it and how you then manage on a match day, would be my take.
How can coaches devise game plans that include intended outcomes that are linked to previous training sessions? Dead
simple one, just whatever the objectives were in a training session, just have the same objectives for match day would be that bit of advice. If I was working on getting crosses in the box from inside the penalty area, just make sure that that message transfers directly into game day. Dead simple.
I think it helps lead your pre-match talk and your half-time team talk and your post-match talk about what are the 2 or 3 things that we're going after. It could be 1 in possession target, 1 out of possession. It could be 2 or 3 in one space of those, because that's what your intended outcomes are for that game. And I think once you've got those, it can really help lead those conversations and really get the players involved in that conversation as well, because that's what they've been working on that week.
And I think just on that, while during the week you have been working on that intended outcome, training to match varies and the situations change. So although we want to go after that, to still have an open mind, you know what, we might not get all of it, but that's what we're going after, and we might get some parts of it. And what that some part looks like might not be the end picture, and we might work on it over a period of time, or between first half and the second half, or the 4 periods and so forth. So in that way, still having a little bit of an openness and giving the players some ownership to actually see, like, okay, it's different to training, but can we still get this?
Yeah, I like that. I remember working with a coach once, and it was a big in possession objective of getting the ball into wide areas, and the team they played against dominated them, and it was very difficult for them to get the ball out of their own half of the pitch into wide areas to go and attack from. So actually having that secondary objective, or that openness to go, actually today we're not going to be able to meet the objectives that we might have worked on in training because the opposition have just been too superior for us, and we just can't do it. So actually to then go, how do we then operate a little bit of a block or units of the team defending together? I guess that's 11-a-side football we're looking at, but certainly to have some openness to deal with what the game presents, the problems the games present, the challenges the games present to players that we might not understand before the game.
And I think that with that, like, it just shows the players are actually aware of what's going on and applying their learning and having some ownership around that. And I think that's the part where you're seeing that, okay, learning is being applied based on the situation. So in that way, sometimes as coaches need to hold back and not look for the final outcome, and see that the process is in play in order for that to happen in the long run.
On having openness to deal with what the game presents, I guess the challenge will be as a coach is to go, well, if I haven't coached it to my players, how much information do I give them on a match day? How much do I let them deal with it? And then when do I give them that information at a later date? And how do I support them with that? And where does it fit in terms of their development with whatever the game has thrown at them? I think that could be another challenge that's thrown at the coach when the ball starts to roll.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, especially if you've had a focus of maybe, playing out from the back and building, and you're playing against a team that's putting a really high press on, and they're struggling to get out, and then they've got to have that problem-solving ability of going, well, this isn't working, and what we've done in training might not be helping us this time, and it's that recognition of going, I need to now adapt and change to that, and having players that can solve problems is so important. And I think if we set up our training sessions well enough, our players should be able to do that on match day, and that is really linked to our philosophy of what we're trying to do over the course of a season.
What should coaches take into account when planning their team selection and systems of play?
That's a really broad question. Like, how many different things can you take into account? It could be the opposition, it could be your team, it could be the development of players, it could be the proximity of match day to train. There's a whole host of things. I guess my one would be just think about your players. That would be the key one for me. Like, what is it that your players need at any given moment, and how can you provide some support with that in terms of their development? Or it could be, how do I play against somebody who's taller than me? How do I play against somebody who's faster than me? Like, there could be things thrown up there. So I would go, just think about what you can give your players as a key message, but there's a whole host of things that you might consider.
I think just on that, from an academy perspective as well, sometimes when you could turn up for a fixture or fixtures arranged, you've been playing 7v7 on one size pitch, and you go to another club and they've turned the pitch around and you're playing on a bigger space now. So within the planning, having that awareness, you know what, it might be a bigger pitch. We've been playing this system, might have to tweak certain things or change some roles and responsibilities. So having awareness in terms of changes of pitch, dimensions and so forth, and goes into account with what players have we got.
I think your player profiles and knowing those players is so important. Have you got a number 9 that wants to hold the ball up? Have you got a number 9 that wants to run in behind? And that might then influence how you play to get the best out of those players. But then thinking about their development, if they're not as good at holding the ball up, making sure we set up situations that we can put the ball into their feet, so they get that side of it and that development. So I think our system and how we play has really got to be reflective of the squad that we've got, and then picking the best system and patterns of play and players into that works best for our young players in front of us.
And just on that, in terms of like academies are being creative and grassroots being creative, sometimes they might play two small-sided game and then go into a bigger game. How does the two small-sided games in terms of link in with the bigger game? Is it a connected formation or a shape or roles and responsibilities? So trying to thread some of that learning, so when we're going from a small jigsaw puzzle onto the bigger part of it, that there is a little bit more succinctness. So trying to plan for, I suppose, like connectiveness between formation, shapes, roles and responsibilities and challenges that we set players. And
also like external things like weather, the pitch conditions, etc. You're not going to be able to play a really tight passing game of football on a wet, bobbly pitch. You might need to play a little bit more direct in those situations. So it's managing the environment and the situation that's in front of you.
And just moving forward, we're coming into a space where there's going to be more and more tournaments, and tournaments create so many opportunities in terms of winning, losing, or trying to stay in a game and so forth. So in that way, how do you consider the players that have played where you are in the stage of the tournament? What do you need to actually alter in order to get the best out of the players and also the collective group?